What happens when you eat too much pie?
What?
Your circumference increases.
That is faux show.
Hungry Squared, bringing you the best food talk anywhere.
Welcome to the Hungry Squared podcast where the brain and belly meet. I'm Sharon from the Wasatch Cooking Guide.
And I'm Winter from theredparty.com. This week, we have a really awesome interview.
We do.
Like, I'm super excited. We chatted with the folks at ThermoWorks, you guys, and that was awesome. We learned a ton about thermometers and heat distribution. I mean, it was
really fun.
It was really good. Really, really good. So let's talk about it. Oh, hi, Sharon. How's it going this week?
Good. How are you?
Is it? Yeah, we're doing good too. Can't complain. Did you eat anything fun this week?
I did. This week was Pie Day.
Yes.
This last week.
Which happens to be on
3.14, March 14th. And
for all you nerds.
Yeah. It is a food holiday.
It is. It's a major food holiday.
Yeah. So I took advantage of the major food holiday and I had a lot of errands to run that day. So I was like, oh, well, this will be a good day to get pizza. Pizza pie.
Oh, yeah.
And so I went to Este Pizza.
I have never been there before.
Oh, it's super good.
Is it?
Yeah. So ESTE.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Este Pizza. I went to their Sugar House location in Salt Lake City. So if ever you guys are in Salt Lake City, you should stop by Este Pizza. They had a Pie Day special.
Yeah.
And it was a small pizza, which their smalls are 14 inches. It was a small cheese pizza for $3.14.
What?
Which is a steal.
That is amazing. And was it good?
Oh, it was delicious.
What kind of style pizza are we talking about?
This is New York style pizza.
Okay.
You could fold it if you wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that kind of
thinner
stuff. Mm-hmm. But the crust is really yummy. It's got a good mouthfeel, got a good texture, good chew.
I love that.
Yeah. And it's not too doughy and it is not too greasy. Usually the New York style pizza, you kind of think, if you've never been, which I haven't, maybe you might think Sparrow. I don't know for any of you Office fans, the authentic New York style pizza from the mall, but you just think of those big wide slices that are just dripping in grease.
Yeah. Sitting under heat lamps.
Right. This is not that. This is really delicious. So I also got 2 other pizzas. I got a pepperoni and a sausage.
Nice.
And their sausage is more like a shaved chorizo.
Oh.
It's really tasty.
Wow,
that's
really?
the boys, like, they exclusively eat cheese and sausage pizza.
Okay.
No vegetables or anything else on it. And so they ate their whole pizza. Then they ate most of another pizza.
So it was a hit.
It was a huge hit.
Was a hit.
Usually they only eat 2 to 3 pieces and they're just maxed out of just your typical commercial delivery kind of stuff. But this was right in the neighborhood where I was running my errands and stuff like that. So I just ran in and got it. And
nice.
It worked out well.
Okay, Este, I have not tried it. There's one just down the street from where I work.
Yeah, they have
downtown.
really good lunch specials. I think you can get it by the slice during lunch.
Which is sometimes nice. You just don't want an entire pizza.
Yeah, their pizzas are really big. They're on the bigger side. They're like 14, 16, and 18 inches.
Yeah, that's sizable. Well, I will put a link in the show notes. So if you happen to be in our neck of the woods, then you can go visit them. I wonder if they have any ones outside of Utah.
They are just a local place.
Sorry, people outside of Utah.
Yeah.
Wah, wah.
Yeah, it was the owner he moved here to Utah from New York.
Oh, he did? And he
saw that there was
a
lack in the pizza market here. So he filled that need.
Okay, well, there you go. Pizza pie for the Pie Day.
What did you eat this week?
Lots of pie. I really did. I was, so as you know, Sharon, I think in our very, very, very first episode about pie, we talked about how Lee's family, they have a Pie Day party.
Yeah, and it's a competition and they have a quiz.
There's
and
a
all
quiz.
That kind of stuff.
You bring pie and such. And so I want to bring up 2 pies that were outstanding. One was savory and one was sweet. And these are my twin sisters-in-law. They're both married, but so they brought totally two different things. But my sister-in-law, she made this absolutely gorgeous vegetable pie. Now that doesn't sound that appetizing personally.
No, but if you go onto the Hungry Squared Facebook page, you can see a picture of that pie and it is very Instagram worthy.
Yeah. So she shaved bits of the like long shaved the carrot and the zucchini and that type of thing so that they were big long strips. And then she basically made it into a circle, like a budding flower. I don't know how to explain it, but it's like layer upon layer.
It does kind of look like rose petals or something like that with the ribbons.
Yeah. And she had put some pesto on the bottom, like this lovely pesto underneath the crust. And then, and the crust she did really well because, you know, crust puffs up just a little bit, but her crust was super thin still and nice and crispy. So it didn't get soggy because there was, I mean, think about it. There's a lot of moisture in vegetables.
Yeah. Especially those ones like zucchini.
And so that was beautiful. And she had sprinkled some herbs and such and olive oil on top. And it was really tasty and so pretty. I mean, it did not cut pretty. I'm just going to tell you that right now. So that's why I had to take a picture beforehand. So that was the one pie. And then her sister, her twin sister, she made a 3-berry pie with a pretty lattice work also on the top. And man, you know, berry pies are so, they are wonderful because when you eat it a la mode,
you get the tart and the sweet.
Oh man, it's so perfect. And because I think berry pies can be a little, I mean, very sweet. Like I think they can be too sweet sometimes. But then when you have a scoop of vanilla ice cream, it's perfect. It's perfect.
Kind of mellows it out.
Yeah.
What berries were in it?
I think blueberry and maybe raspberry, blackberry.
Okay.
I didn't even ask. I was just eating. I was just busy eating. It was sure good though.
That's the best job.
Yeah. And we didn't, so we had more of a quiz that was a verbal quiz. And so,
okay.
But it was pretty funny because my mother-in-law, Kathy, she talked, she was giving these really bad pie jokes and you had to guess the answer to them. And if you could guess the answer, then you got a point.
Kathy, if you could email those bad pie jokes to hungrysquirt@gmail.com, I'd really appreciate
I think I could obtain that list, but it was pretty funny because I was so not quick on the draw because I was like, I am so lame because everybody else is getting all these like ridiculous answers. And I'm like, I'm not going to win this year.
It's part of the fun of telling you the jokes at the beginning of the episode.
Yeah, I know.
have to say.
Because I just don't get it sometimes. Yeah, so that's what I ate this week, and it was wonderful. Loved it. It was such a good week.
And now for the main course.
Okay, you guys. So our interview is with Martin Earl from ThermoWorks. He is their culinary editor. He is a chef. And he has been working with ThermoWorks for quite a while now. And we were really excited to talk to him about heat and thermometers and measurement and things like that. It's a really good interview and we hope you enjoy it. But there are a few, not necessarily corrections, but we have a few clarifications for our interview going forward.
Yeah, because we were able to talk to them. So we went and kind of spent the afternoon with them.
Yeah, and we got a tour and we got like 2 tours. We got like the preliminary tour and then we had this wonderful interview, great conversation with Martin. And then we got
the formal tour.
The formal post tour after that.
Yeah.
So we do talk about calibration of thermometers. When we talk about it in the interview, we're really talking about verifying the calibration of the thermometer.
Exactly.
The technical calibrating of the thermometer is done at ThermoWorks. They have these scientist technicians who actually open your thermometer up and that kind of thing. And they do the technical calibration. When we talk about it in the interview, we're just talking about verifying the correctness.
Because they talk about the thermopen has an accuracy and we're going to totally get into this because it has a spec of plus or minus 0.7 degrees Fahrenheit. And so if you're doing the verification of the thermometer, and if it reads 32.6 degrees Fahrenheit when you're doing a properly made ice bath, then you don't need to do anything to it. It's within its spec.
Yeah. And so ThermoWorks, actually, we'll put a link in the show notes. They've got a great article about creating an ice bath and how to do that. So we'll put a link to that in the show notes.
Yeah, that's a great resource. So,
And then we talk about 2 types of thermometers when we're talking to Martin. So be on the lookout for that. But when we're talking about that, we're talking about resistance temperature detectors.
yeah, there are a ton of different thermometers. So don't misconstrue that, because there's, glass tube thermometers, liquid crystal thermometers. Those are kind of like mood rings. I don't know if you
Right. Yeah. The two different types, we're talking about resistance measuring thermometers.
Yes.
So like a thermistor. I can't even say that word. And then the RTDs, which are the resistance temperature detectors.
Yeah. So we'll talk way more about that. We just wanted to put that in your ear. So just don't think that there's only 2 types of thermometers. There's a whole bunch of them that are out there. So
yeah. And then we also briefly touch on infrared thermometers. And we do want to clarify that you can use an infrared thermometer for soup. A lot of we talk about that. A lot of restaurants actually do that, but they're taking a scoop usually from the middle or the bottom of the giant
big stock pot, right?
Huge stock pot. Like those stock pots that have like 6 handles on them and stuff like that they're huge industrial size. We had said that you wouldn't really use one of those for a soup, and you wouldn't for just that top surface temperature, but you could still use it if you were taking scoops from like the middle or the bottom of the soup and measuring it.
That would be a little bit more of an accurate reading. Is that what you understand?
Yeah.
Sharon?
But just to measure the soup, just kind of like a passing type of thing, you wouldn't do it on the top. And restaurants, that is considered food safe to do. Like restaurants do that. Sometimes.
Right.
And then our last point of clarification was the Thermoped MK probe length, and it's 4.5 inches in length.
Yeah, it's quite a bit longer than the houseware quality stuff that's out there. Those are generally about, 3.5 or so.
Yeah, sometimes even less than that.
Yeah,
they're a bit shorter than the Thermopen.
Yeah, so it's nice knowing that. So we are so excited for you guys to listen to this episode. We'd love to hear your feedback. And of course, please jump into our giveaway. Also, you'll hear a little bit more of that at the very end. So enjoy the episode.
All right, we are here with Martin Earl. He is the culinary editor at ThermoWorks. You guys might know ThermoWorks through our spirit animal, Alton Brown.
Yep.
Who talks about their thermometers and
their
tech
heat gun.
Gadgets.
Yeah.
Heat gun all the time. Martin is, again, the culinary editor. He received a bachelor's from the University of Utah in physics. He received a master's degree in history and philosophy of science at Indiana University. And
Go Hoosiers.
he started taking culinary classes while he was pursuing his master's degree. He is a craft brewer of ginger ale. He's got several different flavors that he's made. He is a chef known at restaurants such as C3 Bar, Scholars and Bakehouse, and The Roof, and now he's at ThermoWorks. So welcome to the show, Martin, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Sharon. I'm glad to be here. Winter, good to see you.
We are so excited to have you on. This is so exciting.
I'm excited to be here.
This is going to be so fun. We actually ran into the ThermoWorks folks a couple years ago at a blogger event, and we were like, we need to have you on. So it's kind of been a long time coming. And then we went to Alton Brown this last year. Last year.
Yep.
And Alton was using one of your heat guns. Like he called you guys out.
Show.
Oh, that's nice.
I know. It was pretty awesome. And he's like, this was made here in Utah, you guys. And so we're like, yeah, we definitely need to have you guys on and chat. So when our contact with ThermoWorks mentioned that you had a bachelor's in physics and then history of science, I'm like, yeah, let's chat about that.
Well, good. I'm glad. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about these things. So I'm glad to be here.
Let's get started really quickly. So ThermoWorks, they produce quite a few things, and let's just kind of talk about that. They make mostly thermometers.
Absolutely. Thermometers and temperature monitoring equipment, which is just to say thermometers. Again, we make a wide variety of things for home purposes, for industrial purposes. We make it the top of the line thermometers that you can get for the home kitchen as well as for many other industrial applications. So we're kind of at the top of the game in that respect.
Yeah, we have ThermoWorks thermometers and we love them. So then let's back up because our listeners kind of love to geek out on this type of thing. So can you tell us how thermometry, the science of temperature taking began?
Well, sure. The idea that temperature should be monitored goes back a long, long time. The first candy thermometer was really kind of invented in the 1200s. Yeah, I know, right?
1200s.
1200s. And that was for measuring the temperature of sugar syrups for candy making. But the ideas that early thermometry were based on was expansion, thermal expansion. When you get things warm, they expand. And that idea goes all the way back to the Greeks, actually. That was first observed by the Greeks in like 200 BC. So the ideas, the central ideas for thermometry have been around for more than 2,000 years. Thermometry really got going with Galileo. He made the first bulb thermometer, which was just basically a bulb with a tube in an open dish of water. And he would put things against the bulb. And if they were hot, it would warm up the air and push the water down. And if they were cold, it would cool the air and pull the water up. Really not an efficient thermometer, though, because you don't want to stick your chicken breast up against a thing over a bowl of water all the time.
That's funny.
You're going to get salmonella. Things developed from there with people using air thermometers, mercury thermometers, alcohol thermometers, and things like that. Always basically on the same idea that if you heat something up, it's going to expand, and if you cool it down, it's going to contract. And Fahrenheit created a scale. Celsius created a scale. Celsius put his on backwards. Actually, when Celsius invented his scale, he put the freezing point at 100 and the boiling point at 0. And someone eventually convinced him that was a silly idea.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, no. When he officially originally wrote his scale, it was on backwards.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which is interesting, and I don't know why he did it that way. But eventually, so we went through kind of these early stages of thermometry, and then we got to the modern age. And now the best thermometers don't use expansion, but they use electric current to measure temperature. So, yeah.
Okay. Actually, I do want you to expand a little bit more on that, because obviously, like, I just can't imagine like bringing a mercury thermometer into the kitchen, for example. I mean, that probably poses some possible risks of maybe breakage and exposure and that type of thing.
Absolutely, it does. Absolutely. So, I mean, before the digital thermometers, you had basically two kinds. You had your alcohol thermometers, also sometimes mercury thermometers, which you should never, ever use in the kitchen. If you still have one that your grandmother had or something, you put it on a shelf and look at it, but don't ever make candy with it, because you don't want that in your life.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's bad. So glass thermometers pose all sorts of risks. If you break a mercury thermometer, you have mercury poisoning, but you get little glass shards in your food, you have to throw the whole batch out and stuff like that, right? There's no straining that out with any kind of surety. But there were also bimetallic strip thermometers. So like the dial thermometers you see all the time, that works on the same principle, where you have two strips of metal that are up next to each other that are different kinds of metal, and they expand and contract at different rates. So when you put it into, say, a chicken or something, one of them expands more quickly, and that creates a torque on the needle up at the top. And that's how the bimetallic thermometers work.
Oh, I've actually wondered about that. I'm like,
nice.
I don't think they don't feel super accurate to me.
Well, and that's good, because they're not. They can get knocked out of accuracy really easy. If you just torque the top just a little bit, then you're off. I actually tried to calibrate one the other day, and it was off by 40 degrees. It was like it had been sitting in a drawer for a while, and had been opened and closed a whole bunch of times and stuff like that. And so when I took it to a controlled bath, it was 40 degrees off, and that's unacceptable. You're going to burn your chicken that way.
Yeah, or you're going to give yourself salmonella.
Yeah, one way or the other. It's not going to be good. And then also, because of the way that they expand and contract, they don't always contract back as far as they started. So you should be calibrating it basically almost every time that you use it. And that's obnoxious.
That is totally obnoxious. I don't think we have one of those. I think we may have given it away, but it is... I don't think we calibrated it once. We're going to talk about calibration later.
We'll talk about calibration later.
We'll make a note of that.
So that's what we had for literally hundreds of years. The candy thermometer that your grandmother used is the same candy thermometer that her grandmother used. Yep. And technology has advanced since your great-great-grandmother started learning to cook candy a little bit. So now we use digital thermometers are the best way to go. And there's two main classes of digital thermometers. You've got your thermistor, which is a thermal resistor, and you have your thermocouple. And we make both of those here at ThermoWorks. A thermistor is just a resistor that you run a current through, and the hotter it is, the faster those molecules in there are moving, the easier the electrons get freed up and things like that, the easier it is for the current to slip through. So you run a current through it, and if it's hot, the more current runs through. If it's cold, the less current runs through. And it just has basically a calculator at the back end that calculates the difference between the output and the input.
Well, that made it sound easy.
Well,
it's very technical.
No big deal or anything like that.
Well,
actually, I'm glad you that was a really good lay person's explanation on that, because my physics is not my strong suit. I'll just tell you that right now.
I didn't learn a lot about solid state physics. That wasn't a class that I took. And so like resistor theory and things like that, let's not go into that today.
Okay, that's totally fine.
Good. Then the other kind of digital thermometer is the thermocouple. And what you have there is you have two kinds of wire that are welded together just at the very tips. There's a micro weld. One kind of wire is made out of one thing, and another kind of wire is made out of another thing. And
wait, how are they welded together? Are they like right next to each other?
Basically, you weld the tips of them together.
Oh, okay.
So just like you weld one tip of one wire to another tip of another wire. One of our most popular kinds, there's various types of probes for this, and we'll go into that a little later. But what we use a lot of is type K probes. I don't know why they're called type K, but one wire on that is made out of nickel and chromium, and the other wire is made out of nickel and aluminum and silicon. And what those each do is the two different metals in each thing act like individual batteries. So a battery is like a stack of metals of different kinds with some stuff between them, and you just move the electrons around.
Right. Okay.
So one wire is one battery, and the other wire is another battery. And when they're put into heat, the difference in the heat from in the heat to out of the heat creates a gradient, and that creates a voltage. So yeah. So then what you do is you hook them up again to a calculator at the back end, and it subtracts one side from the other side to find out what the difference is. And the difference between the two voltages that are produced by the heat in the food or the asphalt or the soap or whatever it is that you're doing give you the temperature.
What?
That's what I said when I learned about it.
That was a little bit more complicated than I was expecting it to be, but I mean, it totally makes sense. You need it to be. And this is, what kind of accuracy we're talking about with these types of...
We're talking about some really highly accurate things. So the type K probes that we use are accurate to 0.7 degrees Fahrenheit.
That's good, you guys.
Yeah, plus or minus on either side. And what really separates even, and some people make good ones and some people make bad ones. And some of what does the best or what makes the big difference there is the calculator at the back end and how sensitive it is and things like that. So 0.7 degrees, and that's really across most of the range of the thermometer. So some things get more or less accurate across the curve of temperature, but these stay pretty constant.
That's pretty impressive because yes, you're right. It is difficult to maintain that kind of give on when you go super high or super low.
Yeah, if you're deep frying at 375 or if you're like working with some ice cream or something like that, you want to have the same accuracy. And so digital is really the only way to go for that. I mean, can you imagine a dial thermometer that goes from 0 up to like 475?
Yeah, that's not gonna.
Yeah, unless you've got like a dial the size of a bus like steering wheel or something like that with all the degrees on there, it's not going to work.
Yeah. I guess this would be considered modern day thermometry.
Absolutely.
With these thermocouple and
thermistor. Thermal resistor. Yep.
Thermal resistor. That's right.
Yep.
And so how old is that technology? Do you know?
I don't remember exactly how old that is. I went down and talked to our head of thermometry the other day, and I didn't ask about when that got started. And
I'm sure it's been developed forever.
We didn't talk a lot about that in my history of science classes. So, I mean, this is a really great thing. One of my slogans here anyways, and kind of the mantra that we work from is that in the kitchen, knowledge is power. So if you have thermal knowledge about your food, you can create better food. Because if you know how many degrees your chicken is from done, or your burger is from done, or the steak that you paid good money for, you know exactly what temperature that is, then you have control over that and you're going to get better results. We feel that thermometry, using good thermometers in the kitchen, can lead not only to better food, but because food is such an integral part of life, as I'm sure we've discussed on this podcast in the past, that it leads to a better quality of life, honestly. I mean, avoid sickness by having food that's cooked, avoid dryness and have a better meal. It's just, we really feel that having that thermal knowledge at your fingertips that you can get from a highly accurate device just leads to a better life in general.
Yeah, quality of life is a big thing.
So is food safety.
Yeah.
Food safety is a big part of quality of life. Yeah.
Yes. It's really important. I think it's something that we all take for granted way too often.
Oh, yeah.
So speaking of food safety and food temperature, when did that kind of start to become more of a thing? Like we talked about, like in the 1200s, there was candy thermometers, but we weren't really measuring temperature of food necessarily, more just oil.
Right. And it wasn't about safety so much as just getting a certain consistency at the time, right?
Right.
You could say that the food safety end of thermometry really got kicked into high gear during the space race. That's when the first HACCP plans were developed. The Hazard Assessment and Critical Control Point assessments were created by Pillsbury and NASA together to make sure that when astronauts went into space, they did not get food poisoning.
That is two companies that I would not have paired together.
No, seriously.
I know, right? Yeah, no. Pillsbury worked with NASA to make sure that they were creating safe food. And the idea was that at critical control points, you would do critical control things to make sure everything's all right at this point. Sure. Is this temperature okay here? Is this pH okay here? Is this happening in a fast enough time and stuff like that? So HACCP is, I think, really kind of the beginning of when that really took off. And if you go to culinary school now today, you're going to have a class where they're going to talk about HACCP, and you're going to have to write up a paper about how to make a tuna fish sandwich where you've controlled all your critical control points and things like that. Mm-hmm. And so I would say that's really kind of the beginning of it. People were interested in food preservation and therefore safety and its relationship to temperature much earlier. Francis Bacon famously died stuffing a chicken with snow when he was trying to see if he could preserve chicken with snow in the late 1600s.
That's how he died?
Yeah, well, I mean, he didn't die while stuffing the chicken, but he got sick while he was outside stuffing a chicken with snow.
Goodness.
And then died from that.
Oh my goodness.
That's called dedication to your craft.
It really is.
The more you know, friend.
I know.
This is awesome.
Seriously. Quality of life, right?
Yeah, that's right.
We're going to connect to that.
So, I mean, he was obviously worried about preservation and the relationship to temperature. But, I mean, there were some other things going on with his assumptions there that we're not going to go into right now about shapes of things, but that's okay.
Okay, that's crazy. Going back to that, we decided at some point in time that like chicken should be cooked to this temperature. And if you want this to be safe, I'm sure it's all part of this. So they determined this with Pillsbury and NASA. Like, these are the safe temperatures in which chicken needs to be cooked to in order to be consumed and not make somebody sick. Is that kind of what they decided?
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure that came exactly out of the Pillsbury NASA collaboration, but yeah, I mean, in essence, through studying bacterial growth, through studying bacterial death. Also, they eventually decided that, I mean, because when you were talking about chicken, we're basically talking about salmonella. You just don't worry about E. coli. E. coli is endemic to mammals. Salmonella is endemic to birds and reptiles. So it's a problem with turtle soup also. So when we're talking about salmonella, if we just know the temperature that salmonella can't reproduce at or that it dies at, if we can get the chicken to that temperature, we're good. And pasteurization is basically what we're talking about there. Pasteur was worried about food safety, and he found that temperature could control also. So that even goes back to him, right? It's kind of interesting talking about quality of life, quality of food, and foodborne illness. Chicken's actually a prime example where there's kind of a misunderstanding. And I don't want to sound bad about this. It's not a bad misunderstanding. It's better for people to be safe than sorry. But pasteurization is actually a function of both time and temperature. It's not just temperature. So if you get your chicken to 165 degrees, it's safe basically instantly. If you get up to 160 degrees, but you leave it for a few more seconds, it's also going to pasteurize. We recommend cooking Thanksgiving turkey to 157 degrees and then letting it rest for at least, I think, I'm not sure the exact number, but I think it's about 24 seconds at 157 degrees, does the same thing as 165 in no seconds. So what you do there is you preserve juiciness and tenderness in the bird, but you still kill off the bacteria that you're worried about. And they don't teach that in culinary school. They only talk about that at the USDA.
Interesting.
Well, and the thing is, I mean, it totally makes sense because, I mean, the home cook is not going to be as savvy to kind of the two variables that we're talking about. It's temperature and time. And
if you've got someone who's a line cook who's also in high school or something like that, like they're not going to like be really into the nuance. But the nuanced truth of it is that you can kill bacteria at lower temperatures and have a better product. And that's why a great thermometer is a really good thing, because if you can get that to 157 degrees and then eat it, you've never had a turkey so juicy. Like, I promise.
Because let's be honest, turkeys are a struggle.
They are.
Well, as long as we're talking about turkeys, do the pop-up thermometers on a turkey work?
That's a really interesting question. We've had some real interesting experiences with that here, talking to people from that industry. The turkey thermometers are accurate, yes. But the turkey thermometer that goes into most turkeys is set to 180 degrees.
Oh,
whoa.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
So that's for an overcooked
That's
turkey.
for an overcooked turkey. You put that in the breast. Also, so the companies that make those, they engineer them to be very accurate. And the science that goes into those is really interesting. It's some polymer science and some proteins and stuff like that. And when they reach a certain temperature, they release. It's actually really cool. But they sell them to the turkey companies, and then the turkey companies stick them anywhere on the bird that they want to.
Oh, that's not...
This is a conspiracy to have everybody's turkey be dry.
Correct.
That's it.
Well,
really
I mean, I don't know if it's actually a conspiracy, but it sure feels like a conspiracy.
It is.
Feeling the same as fact.
No, seriously, that is crazy. You can put them anywhere. I found them in a couple of different places where you're like, this is not the same that I've seen before.
Well, and it would be okay if they took that pop-up probe and you put it in the deepest part of the thigh, and you spatchcock your turkey, which is to say, cut out the backbone and smash it flat. Then you're probably going to be okay, because the dark meat can cook to a higher temperature and be okay.
Right.
And it should be cooked to a higher temperature. Otherwise, it's going to be all rubbery, and no one likes rubbery dark meat. They want tender, pulled pork consistency dark meat. So if you were to move it from there to there and leave that gaping hole in the turkey over in the breast where it can leak out, whatever, I guess maybe it'll work out. But generally, we recommend just leaving the turkey thermometer in there and ignoring it.
Okay. Did everybody note that?
Use your ThermoWorks thermometer instead.
Find something that's more accurate. Come on, 0.7 degree difference. Come on, people.
0.7 is pretty dang good.
It's awesome.
So then we can talk about like the difference between a leave-in probe or an instant read thermometer, right?
Let's talk about that, because I feel like I don't know how to use a leave-in one.
So your leave-in probes, you're going to put in your food, and then you're going to start cooking it, and you're going to leave it there the whole time. And that's a turkey or a chicken or a roast is a prime example of this. We make products with alarms on them, with multiple alarms on them, so you can set it to 135 degrees or something like that for a beef roast, and it'll come out nice and medium at that temperature by the time it finishes resting. So you put it in and you set an alarm, and the cord just comes out of the oven and connects to the unit outside the oven. You can monitor the temperature the whole time.
So the cord is heat safe then?
Yeah, up to like 500 or 600 degrees. And if you're cooking a roast higher than that, I don't know how you're doing that.
We're making really...
Or why you're doing that.
Right, yeah. And so also a leave-in probe you wouldn't put like on a grill when you're grilling burgers, because the flames that come up out of that from the, like, you can have spikes up to 1200 degrees on a grill and things like that. So you're going to want to avoid that there. An instant read is what is great for checking. Like if you're doing burgers on the grill or something and you think they're done, you stick them with an instant read thermometer. The Thermopen, for instance, has a speed of 2 to 3 seconds, and you can get it in there. And really the best thing to do when you're checking anything with an instant read thermometer is put it almost all the way through the meat. Go all the way to the back side of it and pull it slowly through, and then you look for the lowest temperature reading. Food is only as cooked as its lowest temperature, right?
Mm-hmm. I don't think I realized. So, okay, let's just say that again. So you put it almost through the meat, and then pull it out.
And then pull it out slowly.
And just kind of read.
Draw it through. And because there's temperature gradients, right?
Yeah,
if you think about the rings on a tree is like the temperature rings in a steak. And you want to find the lowest one to know what the lowest temperature is, and that's really important. So as you do that, you also need something that can respond fast enough to the temperature changes as you're pulling it through there. And that's why a high-speed thermometer is good. A bimetallic strip thermometer, not only is it slow, but the sensor on a strip thermometer is actually about 2 inches long, 1 inch to 2 inches long. So you're actually taking an average across that whole space. And if you have a 2-inch steak, that's going to give you a reading that is just straight up wrong. I mean, there's no other way to talk about it. It's useless information. And so putting it in, drawing it through with a high-speed thermometer is really your best bet.
And Martin, the probe on these, how big is the probe on the tip? Is it
the probe on the tip of our thermometers is about 1/8 of an inch.
Oh, so it's very tiny. So really,
very tiny.
That's it's not the 2 to 3 inches on a.
That's right. And I mean, technically, we are taking the average of the temperature over 1/8 of an inch, but it's 1/8
of an inch.
I think that's close enough for most people.
Yeah.
If it's close enough for Nathan Myhrvold, it's close enough for me.
Wait, who's Nathan Myhrvold?
Oh, he wrote Modernist Cuisine.
Oh, yes.
We've got one in the library here. We'll show you. Well, I'll show you after the thing.
That book
it's gorgeous.
Is gorgeous.
His bread one. Have you seen his bread one?
I don't know if I've seen that one.
We'll show you that one too.
That sounds awesome. Okay, so there's the leave-in probe, and then there's the
instant read.
Instant read.
Yep.
What if I'm roasting a turkey on my barbecue? Like, what would I try to do an instant? I mean, we don't want to flame the wire.
If you're cooking you wouldn't be probably cooking a turkey at super high temperature on a grill, right? Because you're going to dry out that exterior layer of meat before you get to it, and so. A leave-in probe is probably going to be okay in there. We use leave-ins all the time for barbecue projects and things like that. A grill set to 225 or 300 degrees, no problem at all. Go ahead and stick it in there and monitor the temperature. We have some that also have like Bluetooth capabilities and radio capabilities that will connect to your phone or something like that, so you can be in the house. You don't have to be out there watching the temperature the whole time. You can go to the grocery store and like look at your smart device and see what temperature your food is.
Lee needs that.
I know Lee needs that. Lee. Edit this part out. Just kidding.
But they're a lot of fun that way. Well, and for me, I'm a bit of a nerd, obviously. As if that is not obvious yet, then I need to talk more. It's really fun because some of them also we have that will record the data on your smart device, and you can actually export graphs and spreadsheets with your data.
You could make an Excel spreadsheet or a pivot
brisket.
Table of your meat.
Yes, precisely.
Sharon's looking at like, yep, that's
all right.
That's nerdy.
It's a fun time.
I'm down with that.
So anyways, having something that you can leave in there and monitor the meat the whole time is really, really useful for things like a roast. You don't want to be opening the oven and sticking a thing in it and closing it and opening it and closing it and opening and closing it. You can lose up to 50 degrees of heat every time you open the oven.
Yeah.
And that's adding time onto your cook. And that's adding time that juices are draining out of your roast, and you're just doing worse that way. You know, if you can just put something in there and look at it from outside the oven, that's obviously the best way to go.
Excellent.
Okay. Can we talk about calibration?
Oh.
Please.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about calibration specifically for the instant read thermometers, for example. Well, I guess for every single one of them, but
sure.
That's what most everybody has. I would say most people have an instant read.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can calibrate the leave-in the same way that you calibrate an instant read, honestly. But what you want to do for any calibration, and if you have a dial and you haven't upgraded to digital yet, then you really need to learn to do this. And that's that you're going to make an ice bath, and you want to fill a pitcher or a glass all the way with ice, and the crustier the ice, the better, because you want lots of surface area. And then you're going to fill it up with cold water to the level of the ice. You're going to put the thermometer in there, and you're going to stir it around. And that should read an even 32 degrees Fahrenheit right
You're
there.
going to stir the water with the thermometer.
With the thermometer. And that's the thermometer. Temperature measuring is interesting because the act of measuring changes the temperature of the thing just a little bit.
Yeah.
Because you poke it.
Yeah.
You poke it, right? And that is
You're
movement, and you're changing it. So,
right.
so by moving it around, you're getting a nice average temperature, because if you have a metal shaft thermometer, you're going to be conducting heat down into the ice, down into the water, and you can actually create a tiny little warm pocket.
Oh.
If you think about it.
No, that totally makes sense, because the metal is conductive, okay.
So we're going to stir it the whole time, and we're going to read it while we're stirring it, and you have to stop for a second. That's okay. And if it doesn't read 32 degrees, then you need to change that. And if it's a dial thermometer, you're going to crank the little top thing with a little nut or whatever, and you're going to turn it to 32 degrees. For our Canadian friends, that's 0 centigrade. If it's a digital thermometer, then you're going to follow the manufacturer's instructions for adjusting the temperature and for calibrating at that point. It's way better than the boiling point check, because boiling points are different all over the place.
Yeah, I actually was going to say, I was like, if you said something about boiling point, I'm going to dispute that, because I'm like, we're in Utah, and
elevation.
That's going to play into it. So
yeah, I mean, and not only does elevation play a difference, but the barometric pressure of the day and of the humidity of the day changes the boiling point. So measuring it by boiling is just, I mean, if you like boiling water, then I guess go ahead and do it, but it's not going to give you a real answer.
Okay, so calibration is basically just trying to get your temperature probe back to where it needs to go. The ice test is probably the ice bath is your best bet.
It is the standard. I mean, labs that do calibration, we have a calibration lab here in house. They use a lot of other things. There's things that have to do with like using dry ice and ammonia and things like that. I don't recommend those for the home user.
Don't do that.
Don't try this at home.
It
stinks anyways. You just you don't want to. But all of that aside, like the ice bath method is materials that are easily accessible and are safe, and it's the best way to go, and it's going to give you a good read every time.
I'm going to be Captain Obvious and ask a question.
Cool.
Why would I want to calibrate my thermometer? We've kind of just like talked about doing it, but like, why would I mean, like as a home cook, is it really going to matter for my whatever I'm making?
Absolutely, it's going to matter. So if you have spent good money on a nice prime grade steak and you want it cooked to medium rare because you're doing things the right way,
right?
Right. Then if you're checking that with a thermometer that is off by 5 degrees, 5 degrees is how wide medium rare is. And so you could be reading 134 degrees and you could be at 139 degrees and you have just thrown away the money that you spent on that steak.
But what if it's off even more than 5 degrees? You're going to get some gross,
well done steak, right? And you're going to be really sad and you're going to be mad at whoever didn't calibrate your thermometer. Mm-hmm. And then if it goes the other way, though, right? If you're checking your chicken or something else, right? And it's off and it's reading higher than the actual temperature, and you set it to 157 degrees and you leave it for 20 seconds and you serve it to your family, then you're just serving them like salmonella burgers instead of chicken burgers or something like that.
Fun, not so fun 48 hours for the family.
No, family bonding time that we don't need.
Nope, we don't. Okay, that thank you. I once again, I was just trying to be Captain Obvious on that one because I mean, you're right. Like having something perfectly done is awesome. Like
it is, and that's really what we talk about here. There's a difference between good and great and perfect. And if you want a perfect cooked steak, then you're going to want 0.7 degree accuracy on your steak, or like 1 to 2 degrees at the furthest. Our thermistors are accurate to within 1 to 2 degrees Fahrenheit. That's still not shabby at all.
Not shabby at all. We did have a listener question. What is up with infrared thermometers?
Infrared thermometers are great for non-contact testing. So if you don't want to touch the thing that you're testing, then you're going to use an infrared thermometer. This is great for if you have a griddle or something like that and you're taking the temperature, you want the griddle at 350 degrees. You can't just like put the tip of a thermometer on there necessarily,
right.
Although we do make surface thermometers for that. But you can shine an infrared thermometer on there. And an infrared thermometer is basically, it's just a stack of thermocouples that are on the other end of a lens. And it collects the light, the infrared light, through a lens or not through a lens, depending on which one you have. And it just shines them on those thermocouples. And those thermocouples do their little battery thing and they read it without touching. So it's measuring the output, the black body radiation, if we want to get really technical about it, of the heat of the thing. So it's great for griddles. It's great for, they're used a lot in industrial things for measuring molten things, for measuring vents, actually. People have to measure vents sometimes for things.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
If you want to measure the temperature of a walk-in refrigerator, you just open the door and shine your infrared into the walk-in from outside, and you can read the temperature of the walls, which is equal to the temperature of the whole thing, and things like that. So it can be really useful in situations where using a probe thermometer just isn't efficient or isn't practical. It's not great. It has limitations. For instance, you wouldn't ever use it to check the temperature of a soup.
Oh, yes.
So you wouldn't ever test food with it necessarily, but you
not
could
necessarily.
Food would
Not
test
be a
like
great
a refrigerator, a walk-in, or
exactly.
an oven, something like that.
Like health inspectors tend to use infrareds quite a bit. And if you go in and there's like a little bucket of corn kernels, I don't know, and you like scoop some away and shine into it immediately, then you can know kind of what the temperature is at that point. But the surface temperature, especially things with water in them, is always going to be different than what's deeper down. The top of a soup is going to be 10 to 20 degrees cooler than what's down in the soup because of evaporation.
Right. Okay.
A big mistake that people make is to try to use an infrared thermometer and then just shoot the soup and like, oh, cool, I'm down to 70 degrees. No, you're not down to 70 degrees.
You are going to regret that, actually.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. You talked about a beef roast. I'm like getting hungry talking about all this food. But you talked about a beef roast, and you mentioned a temperature. I think it was 135.
Yeah, if you want high, medium, rare.
Okay.
Especially after resting and carryover.
Okay, you mentioned resting and carryover, because I have always. They always say, okay, it needs to go to this temperature. How do are some of our temperature ranges factoring in resting time? Because it cooks. It will continue to cook once you remove the heat source, or once you remove your food from the heat source. And so can you talk to me about temperatures that are actually listed, or are those not totally accurate? What's your recommendation for how early to take something out?
Most
how
tables,
long?
most tables have done this and things like that, and we have some on our website, and other people have some on their website, and they're all very reliable for the most part. They are final temperatures that you want. So if you have a steak and you want it done to 130 degrees, which is a nice low end of medium rare, you're going to want to cook a steak probably about 2 degrees lower than that. And the sad thing is there's no exact saying how many degrees different you want to cook something for resting temperature. So for when you get the carryover cooking, you have those gradients in the meat. When you take it off the heat or whatever, everything there is going to try to even out. Heat is always trying to even itself out. So it's going to even out, and you're going to take some of the heat from the surface and it's going to go into the center, and that's going to cool the surface and things like that. So let's say you take a whole beef tenderloin roast. That's basically a cylinder that's quite long, right? And it's a couple inches around. And that the length of that doesn't matter so much because you're only dealing with maybe an inch of thickness from center to edge at any given point. So that only has so much thermal mass, we call it. That's not going to get nearly as much carryover cooking as, say, a whole prime rib roast. A prime rib roast it's 8 inches across, 10 inches across. I mean, you can find some gigantic ones. That's a lot of thermal mass between the center and the edge that's going to provide more carryover cooking. So we can't really, I was talking to a customer about this. We can't really come up with a table that says rest a chicken for 5 minutes, rest this for that many minutes and things like that. Because every temperature that you cook it to is going to have different amounts of carryover cooking. Every temperature you cook it at will have different amounts. Every muscle density, every fat content, every geometry. If you had the exact same prime rib that you could clone and like cook a bunch of times, we could totally nail down a temperature chart.
We could get this chart for it'd be
great. But until that happens, I mean, it's some like double integrals to figure out. That's an exaggeration. It's some really nasty integrals to figure out what it's going to take to get down in there.
Totally.
Temperature. So basically, the smaller the piece of meat, the shorter the carryover, the shorter the resting time will be required, and the less carryover cooking you're going to have. So you want something that's large. You can cook a little bit lower from your target temperature than something that's small. Something that's small, you're going to want to cook right up nearly to your target temperature.
So you will want to just keep an eye on it, have your target temperature in mind, your final temperature. You will probably go a couple degrees-ish.
Right, lower.
And then pull it out.
That's right. Again, with the turkey in 157 degrees, setting a turkey to 157 degrees scares a lot of people. But it's not even going to, not only is 157 safe if you leave it long enough, but it's going to get hotter. That's going to rise 3, 5, 7 degrees, something like that, right? So you're going to end up at that safe temperature anyways, even if it weren't for the fact that it's already safe. You're going to have that carryover that's going to be okay.
Okay. And then when I want to check my final temperature, how quickly or how soon should I check my final temperature, or should I just leave the probe in?
Just leave the probe in, actually.
Okay.
Our products anyways have, I think all of them, not the dot doesn't, but all the other ones have a min and max function on them where it will record the lowest temperature since you hit clear and the highest temperature since you hit clear. So if you put a turkey on the counter or a roast on the counter or something like that, and you walk away and you come back and you see now it says it's 140 degrees, but you can look and you can see the highest peak that it went to, 157, 162, something like that. So it'll say that on it. But you can also just stick it with an instant read to make sure it's up to the temperature that you want if you've got the time for that.
Nice.
I like it.
Yeah.
Obviously, the whole resting thing helps continue cooking it, but also just it helps your meat, for example, chill out.
Yeah. So I mean, when you cook meat, you're talking about protein denaturization, right? And so you're taking proteins and they're squeezing each other and they're unraveling and they're re-raveling and all these things. Cooking an egg is just doing that. Like the egg gets really loose for a second and then everything re-tightens up. I'm not going to do a demonstration because this isn't a video podcast, but I usually do something with my arms when I talk about this. But you're basically taking these protein strands and they tighten up under heat, and that squeezes water out of them. And then when you let it rest, those can actually loosen back up again. And just like a sponge that you squeezed water out of, if there's still water there, when you let go of the sponge, it's going to reabsorb that juice. So you can reabsorb some of the juice into the meat instead of cutting into a steak right off the grill or something and having all the juice run out, or a sausage. Sausages are notorious for this. You cut a sausage right off the grill, you're going to have a dry sausage. It needs to rest for a couple minutes.
Resting time is important.
Very.
We all need rest.
Meat, not less than us.
I am curious. So We've talked a little bit about some of the different products that ThermoWorks has. What is kind of a typical, what usually works really well for the home cook, the home baker to have in their armament of kitchen tools, I guess?
Right, absolutely. What we really recommend, if you can do it, is to get a thermopen, which is an instant read thermometer, and something like a chef alarm, which is a leave-in probe thermometer. If you can't afford the $99 for a thermopen, and we understand that's a little bit steep, you can get a thermopop. For less, that's a thermistor instead of a thermocouple. So it doesn't have quite the same degree of accuracy, but it's still really, really fast and still highly accurate for the type of thermometer that it is. So getting an instant read and a leave-in probe is really kind of the best way to go, though, one way or the other. And if you're really interested in leave-in probes, or if you're wanting to get into professional barbecuing or things like that, we have a range of tools for that are really, really hardcore. And if you go to national barbecue competitions, you'll see our products at almost every station.
Nice.
Because that's what you are going to want for that, because the degree of accuracy, the degree of speed that you can get the information with. If you're trying to win thousands of dollars for cooking a brisket, you need to know what temperature that brisket is.
Yeah, lots of pit masters use ThermoWorks.
Absolutely, they do. If you're just trying to make a really good meal for your family on a Sunday afternoon or something like that, maybe you don't need the ThermoQ in quite the same way that other people do. But having an instant read and a leave-in really is the way to go.
Awesome. When I told people that we were coming down here to talk to you, they were like, oh, I need to talk to them about a candy thermometer. So what would actually, do you guys have a candy thermometer?
Yes and no.
Yes and no. Wait,
what do you use for it?
We do. So we don't have one that is specifically a candy thermometer. So there's all sorts of problems with grandma's candy thermometer.
Right.
We've already talked about the problems with glass and alcohol, right? And if you knock it with a spoon when you're stirring and it breaks, then you have to throw out that whole batch. And that is a sticky mess that nobody wants to do. It's more fun to eat it than to throw it out. But beyond that, the way that sugar crystals work and seed crystals work. So if you have the little glass one with the wings, like it looks like a metal sheet with a glass thing running down the center.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a really typical one. That's the classic. That one was invented in the 1600s.
I'm feeling really bad about my candy thermometer right now. I just have to put that out there.
I'm sorry.
I really need to upgrade.
I don't mean to make your candy thermometer feel bad. But so those nooks and crannies in there's like all sorts of little folds in the metal and things like that. Those are locations where seed crystals can set up. And that is why you're maybe getting grainy fudge.
Yes. It really is. I mean, people need to, like we talked about sugar and candy a little bit. And yes, that is a big deal, people. You got to watch your sugars and any residual stuff. That's a good point. I never thought of that before.
That geometry of that thermometer is a gigantic fin that is in essence a radiator, and it's taking heat out of your candy and it's pushing it into the air at a much higher rate than the candy alone can do it. And rapid cooling in the vicinity of that more likely to cause seed crystals. You've got nooks and crannies likely to cause seed crystals. Just the fact that you're leaving a foreign substance in there, and that it's setting against the corner of the pan or something like that, that little nook, seed crystals. Anywhere you can, that's why you want a perfectly clean pot with a perfectly clean spoon. And so what we recommend using isn't even our chef alarm, which seems like a really good idea, that a leave-in probe so you could monitor it. Just use the thermopen. Just stick it in there and stir it around and take it out. And it's accurate within 0.7 degrees. I mean, talk about steak doneness as being only 5 degrees apart. Hardball, softball, crack, all those things, right?
Smaller.
Oh my gosh. You don't want, like, 0.7 degree accuracy is precisely what you need for that.
So kind of just a one and done with a swirl of your
so you stir it around, and you can also avoid getting hot spots that way. Like, again, with the other one, you put it in and you're measuring the temperature in one place in the pan. Mm-hmm. So stir it with the thermopen, get your reading, take it out, and you can see how close you are. And when you get closer and closer, and you see, I mean, if you make a lot of candy, you're going to start knowing what the bubbles look like anyways, which is, magic anyhow. But you'll know when you need to start monitoring, and you can just hold it in there and keep stirring, and hold it in there and keep stirring. And you're moving things around that way, and you just get a better result, because that thermopen has almost no space for crystals to form on it. It's tiny. You're not taking up any space. You're not pumping heat out at as fast a rate because you don't have a big fin. It's really the best way to go.
And how is it cleaned? Like, because I mean, we're sticking this thermopen in meat
whenever
I
just a wet wipe with some alcohol on it, or I mean, don't run it through your dishwasher. The thermopen is waterproof, but it's not dishwasher proof. So if you accidentally drop it in a puddle or something, it's going to be fine. Just wiping it off with a soapy rag. Don't use alcohol on the screen. The alcohol actually causes the screens to cloud But using just like an alcohol wipe, but even just like a glasses wipe or something like that, if you have something for your glasses to wipe them off, that works actually pretty well. Okay. I mean, as long as it's not super toxic or something.
Oh, I'm really excited because I think I might need to throw out my candy thermometer. No, I have one that attaches to the side. So I bought one a little while ago, and it attaches to the side. But I've never thought about having it's reading just one spot.
Absolutely.
And it's got like the hot pan that's affecting it.
Right. It totally is.
Yeah.
And I didn't even think about that. I was like, when you said that, I was like, I feel bad.
It's been handed down to us from our forefathers. Mm-hmm. How are we to know that it wasn't any good until we try something else?
Yeah, right.
So.
Okay, well, that's good to know. I'm actually curious. The ThermoPen is a little on the, it's not short by any means.
No.
But is there one that is a little bit, do you guys have one that's longer?
We have probes that are longer that you can buy. Our Pro Series probes will connect to any of our thermocouple-based, our thermistor-based probe thermometers. And you can get probes for those that are very long if you want to do something that's a leave-in or something like that. I think that I don't know if what we have in the way of instant read. I think when it comes to instant read, the ThermoPen is really all we have for a length. And that's what we have for that. If you want leave-in probes that are much longer, we have those. We have some industrial size probes that are like 3 feet long and things like that. If you need to take the probe, they are really cool. It's tempting to sword fight with them. Not recommended. They are very sharp at the end. Don't do that. I should probably not say that. But we do have really long ones. So if you need to take if you have a gigantic pot of chili that you're cooking over a fire in your backyard for a cookout or something like that, because you're lucky to have a cauldron, then, we have a probe for that. We absolutely have a probe for that.
Holy cow. That's crazy. I was just thinking that I can just see myself like on swirling my ThermoPen around and maybe just splattering myself with some hot sugar. So that's why I was like, I wonder if it comes a little bit longer. Just
candy making is an inherently risky hobby.
It totally is. Yeah. Like it could be really bad.
ThermoWorks also sells burn ointment.
We do have some burn ointment on. Yeah, you can buy some burn ointment, and if you're going to take up candy making, it might be a good idea.
Yeah, it's very rewarding, but it's very tricky, and temperature is hugely important. Hugely important.
Almost more than in any other kind of cooking is candy making temperature sensitive. It just is a real tough nut to crack in that respect.
That is good stuff. Okay, well, I think we're getting close to the end of our time. Is there anything else that you would like to let us know about that's in the works for ThermoWorks?
Sure. Well, we've recently put out some exciting new products. We have a probe thermometer called the Smoke. It's about a year old now. And it's a dual channel. So it's meant for barbecuing, but it's great for so many other things because it has 2 inputs. So one of them you can put like in your smoker and measure your air temperature in your smoker because you want your smoker to stay at 225, 250 degrees, right? Things like that. And you can put another one in the meat to find out exactly how it's done. Also, if you're cooking a turkey, again, classic example, turkeys just keep coming up. You can put one probe in the thigh and one probe in the white meat, and you can check the doneness of both of them, right?
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's pretty swell. So that's a really fun one. We make some other products to go with that let you monitor it further away and things like that. That's really fun. We have coming out, I think by the time this airs, we will have launched our new ThermoPen IR, which is a ThermoPen with an infrared sensor on it also. So you can stick it into there and you can also shine the back end on it.
Dun, dun, dun.
So I just want to say though, this it's mostly going to be used for professionals. We are offering it obviously to everybody, but it's because of the way because of the way the infrared sensor is designed, this one isn't splash proof and it isn't as waterproof and things like that. Okay. So it's not going to be great for like having out on the barbecue when it's grilling and you're like game daying and stuff like that. It's not for everybody. But if you do have applications where you're needing an internal temperature and its surface temperature frequently, then that is, it's really kind of a space saver.
That's kind of cool. Yeah, that is.
It's fun for geeks and it's fun for health inspectors and it's not for every barbecuer out there, but we're really excited about it anyways.
So does that change the how big it is? Because
it's exactly the same size.
The ThermoPen, you guys, is tiny. Like if you think about it, it's not tiny, but it's not a huge. when you think of it,
it's not a piece of luggage.
No,
it fits in your pocket easily.
Totally does.
It's not a problem. And this is exactly the same size. It weighs pretty much the same. There's just some buttons on it for the IR now that are a little bit different. And so that we're excited about that and being able to offer that. There's some other things coming down the pike that I'm not allowed to talk about, but
we see
stay
how
tuned.
you are.
Stay tuned to this station to find out more.
Yes,
Excellent.
for sure. Martin, thank you so much. This has been very informative. Holy cow.
Super educational and fun.
I know. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm back in physics class, but I don't feel so dumb about it.
I didn't ask you to do any equations.
I know, exactly.
There will be a quiz.
Dang it. We actually have a couple of, we do have a giveaway, so we'll give you a little bit more information after we break with Martin. But Martin, thank you.
Hey, thank you. I'm so glad that I could be here. It was a really fun time talking with you both today.
It was so informative. So thanks again to you and to ThermoWorks for your hospitality today. So you guys, as we've already talked about, I just want to let you know that we are having a giveaway. ThermoWorks was super awesome and super generous to give one of our listeners a ThermoWorks, a ThermoPen MK4.
Yes, that is a ThermoWorks ThermoPen MK4, and that's a $100 value.
Yeah. And you guys, I'm going to just tell you this right now. There are 458 reviews on this ThermoPen, and all of them are like 5-star.
Yeah.
Like it's legit. It's a good thermometer. Okay. So if you want to jump over to Instagram, we are having a giveaway at that time throughout this week. So if you want to jump over there, and there will be more details on what you need to do to enter. We want you to follow us, follow ThermoWorks, and maybe one other thing that you have to do. So we are excited to give that away to one of our listeners. So join us there.
Thanks for joining us today for our show. You can find us at hungrysquared.com, on Apple Podcasts, on Stitcher, and on Google Play Music.
Hey, you guys, that was such a fun episode today. I'm so excited that you guys are so nerdy and love to get into it. Follow us on Instagram, like we mentioned before, at Hungry Squared. And you can follow us on Facebook at Hungry Squared Podcast. We have been doing a lot of fun stuff there. Gone to a couple of events recently that have just been a hoot, and we love sharing that with you. So please join us there on Facebook, and join us next week for our next episode of Food Nerdery.
Okay, love you. Bye.
Bye.
Hungry squared, yeah, hungry squared.